Hello. So I have behind me, you may be able to see it, beautiful Tibetan tanka. And this was given to me by a friend. It's quite an old one, 120 years old maybe. And on it, it depicts the Bodhisattva Manjushri. And Manjushri is a male kind of Buddhic emanation. And he holds a sword. He wields a sword, a flaming sword, and it's quite a common icon. This being that holds a flaming sword, or sometimes it's a twin-edged sword. You see that in the image of Melchizedek, Christian image, iconography. And these icons are really interesting. I mean, they might be interesting to anthropologists for their symbolic meanings and stuff, but they actually are very powerful when we understand them in our everyday life. Their real meaning, because they actually have a meaning, and they give us guidance and wisdom for our everyday life. And that's the purpose of them, that they transcend time and they transcend thoughts and ideas, because they're just it's represented in this icon, in an image. And so for me, the sword of Manjushri represents this kind of cutting power of the higher mind, of clarity. But not just clarity, also honesty, self-honesty. And self-honesty, this kind of ability to look within oneself and see truth, see who you are, what you've done, with clarity and with valor. To see all of that, the good and the bad, is actually the foundation of the higher path towards wisdom and awakening. And without this foundation, without this sense of deep stability that comes from that level of courage, really, of looking at oneself, you don't have the foundation to be able to continue up the ladder, to continue to expand. And in fact, without the honesty, you endanger yourself, because if you open yourself up to higher currents and yet you don't see who you are and what you are, then you're in danger of then frying a circuit, let's call it, somewhere. That's a nice way of saying going a little bit crazy, or it's a nice way of saying bringing crisis upon yourself, bringing a deep destabilization into your life. So the combination of a spiritual path and the inability to be honest with oneself is where one needs Manjushri's sword. And the sword is twin-edged because it cuts both the past and it cuts the future. It cuts the past because it severs our attachments to who we think we are, because of who we have been, the things we have done, the good things, the bad things, and the difficulties that we often have in our young years, our childhood, and the programs that we inherit from our peers when we're young, and all of that stuff, our wounding, our ancestral wounding, all of that. Manjushri's sword, one side of it, will help us cut away those ties that connect us to those patterns, paradigms, and programs that keep us set on a certain victim course, that keep manifesting difficulties, certain difficulties and dramas in our lives. And again, it's the lens and the shine of the steel of the sword that represents this honesty, this self-honesty. So that's the past, to be able to cut the past. But also to be able to, when you cut the past, you also own the past. That doesn't mean you kind of jettison the past. It means that you actually have to celebrate your past in a way, as much as you can, to realize that it's a part of who you are. It's brought you where you are now, whether that's good or bad according to your mind. We are the summation of all we've done, good and bad. And so we have to come to terms with all of that inside ourselves. And Manjushri's sword is very good at letting us come to terms with all of that without kind of being weighed down by the heavy weights of our guilt or our shame. And the other side of the sword you can use to cut the future. And the future represents our dreams, our fantasies, sometimes our delusions, sometimes our wishes of what we wish to become, where we see ourselves going, and to be able to sever those attachments cleanly to the detail of what may happen. You see, we don't know what's going to happen in the future unless you're one of the gifted ones who sees that. It's very rare. But what we do know is we know our deepest soul's wish. And our deepest soul's wishes is something we can trust and rely on. But the moment that wish is transferred into the mental plane, and then it becomes an image or some paradigm of something that we would like to happen. We want to have this, we want to make that happen. We see our life going towards this goal, and these are some of the details of how we might like that to look. It's very natural for the mind to do all that and to plan all that. Of course, all of that is just in the air. We don't know whether any of that will happen, even if intuitively we feel it will. We don't know. What we feel is the integrity of our heart's wish, of our soul's yearning for something higher, for something greater, for some sense of wholeness. That we can rely on. But everything else is uncertain. So Manjushri's sword brings us back to the purity of uncertainty, And without that uncertainty being destabilizing, because that uncertainty is actually very pure. So these are the twin edges of the blade of Manjushri's sword, which we can use in our life. And it's simply done through this piercing honesty, to look at yourself, to look at all you are, to look into the dark crevices of your mind, of your memory, of your heart, and to pick up the stones and look under them and see the good and the bad, and just weigh it all without judgment, with equanimity. And then you are what you are. And then you can approach the divine or the higher or the greater world from a place of truth. And that's what this sword is all about for me. And what life will do, especially, if you're drawn to these teachings, this Gene Keys wisdom, this wisdom is a transmission, it's alive. It's not just a kind of set of mental ideas. The codes of the Gene Keys are codes that represent the illusion, the Maya, in which we inhabit. So they're quite powerful in that sense when you start to examine them in your own life and you apply them to your own life, because what happens is life gives you feedback. It offers you feedback, real feedback, in the sense of drama being played out. What we call leelas, like these games, these dances that life offers us to help us see more clearly what's inside us, because what's inside us is manifesting outwardly, some aspect. So we have to work out through our discernment, what aspect of that is a teaching for us. And what's it offering us? What's it showing us? What's it showing you about you? Is it showing you something that you haven't fully admitted about yourself? That's a really positive thing to discover under one of these stones inside our nature. So I really encourage anyone that's drawn to these teachings to really be super clear inside yourself about who you are, about what you've done the good and the bad, and any delusions you may be holding, any expectations you may have, all of that stuff, any guilt that you're carrying, all of that, none of it's wrong, but just to see it, just see it for what it is. And then from there, from that place of truth, from that naked place, you can progress in a clean way, and life will offer you that progression. It will give you the teachings. The Dharma will fuel your progress. So you need Manjushri's sword to be able to cut away the delusions. And the beautiful thing about the image given to us by the Vedas, for example, is that the Maya, the illusion in which we live, that we believe is real, life out here, the phenomenal world, is often seen as a net. We call it Indra's net. And we are caught in the net. And so the great thing about that is that if you're caught in a net, but you have a sword, you can cut the net and cut yourself free. But you don't have to cut every single junction of the net. You only have to cut 3 or 4 junctions that happen to be next to each other in a string, and then you've opened it up, and then you can slip through into liberation. Yeah. So you have to consider what are the junctions that life is showing you, is bringing you through the dramas, through the leelas of your life, of your outside life. What is it showing you? It's pointing you towards something very specific if you can listen. If you can listen to what it's teaching you. And then you can cut that junction of that net and it will open. Something will open inside you. And then you'll be presented another one and you can cut that one. It takes what the Buddhists term as skillful means, the ability to gently cut away the dross, the things, the places that we're dishonest with ourselves, the places of denial, but with the sword. And the sword is, the thing about a sword is a sword needs to be sharp. And, a sword is a sword. You can be gentle, but you still have to cut. And it's you're cutting, parts of your illusion. So wield it gently, but also wield it carefully with discernment. And have the courage to really look at yourself with candid clarity, penetrating clarity, with brutal honesty about yourself, and with deep valor. And this is the foundation of compassion, self-compassion, to be able to see oneself clearly with everything, everything that you are, the good, the bad, without judgment. So, I wish Manjushri's sword upon you. Wield it gently and with grace.